chief U.S. correspondent Alan Fisher there. Alan, will no doubt be coming back to you throughout the course of the morning. If you're just joining us here on Al Jazeera, let's just update you on the breaking news here that the Israeli military has launched what the defense minister said was a preemptive strike against Iran. Apparently, essential sectors there were exempted. This is according to the Israeli military. 3 explosions have been reported in the capital Tehran. At least one is in downtown and one from the north of the city. That's according to sources.
War is something that the United States can't really control in the way that Trump has been able to control the narrative for attacks in Iran last summer, for what happened in Venezuela. An extended war opens up the possibility of things going different.
Israelis will have to wait and see how Iran's response will be, first and foremost militarily, and secondly diplomatically. So it is quite conceivable, although rather improbable, that the Iranians would react militarily but keep the diplomatic track going. Although knowing Khamenei's modus operandi, that might be somewhat difficult to accomplish. But we'll have to wait and see how the Iranians react. It could very well be that they will maintain a military posture on the one hand in relation to Israel if the Americans do not get involved, unlike last time, and then they would keep a separate diplomatic track. But I think the next few hours and certainly the next day or two will be quite telling.
Yeah, I mean, Israel sees Iran as a main regional threat to its security. Just to remind our viewers that last year there was that 12-day war between both sides. With this strike now, so far we're hearing that it possibly could be limited. But of course, that won't be enough for Israel, who sees Iran's nuclear program and their ballistic missile stockpiles as still intact. I mean, that poses an existential threat to Israel, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, that's at least what Benjamin Netanyahu and members of his cabinet say. Let's also remember that the Iranians have constantly been telling us that they would react massively to any strike, even if it's a limited strike. So we'll have to wait and see how Iran will retaliate over the next couple of hours or over the next day or two. And certainly there are people within the Iranian Revolutionary Guards who have been agitating for another round of attacks with both Israelis and the Americans. They want to dispel this assumption on the part of the U.S., the Israelis, and regional actors that Iran is weakened. And so I think we'll have to wait and see how the Iranians will react and what the extent of Iran's reaction would be.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the Iranian response. How do you think the Iranians will respond now? I mean, they knew some attack was coming, whether it was from U.S. military assets or from the Israelis. As you just pointed out, they were expecting an attack from the Israelis. So how do you see any Iranian response playing out?
Well, if the Revolutionary Guards are to be taken at their word, the attack will be quite massive. But that they've been saying that in response to an American attack, not necessarily an Israeli attack. Now, if they attack massively against Israel, obviously the United States will have to be involved, given U.S.-Israeli relations and given Donald Trump's repeated assurances to Israel. And so, I fear we have not seen. I fear we're in for an extremely rough time, given that the Iranians have said they would react massively and with their most advanced weapons first rather than saving them for last, as they did back in June.
Yeah, Mehran, and there is a broader worry, is there not, that this strike in Iran could now spiral into a much broader conflict, particularly with any military response from Iran that you've just talked about. We saw that happen last year with Iran firing missiles into the US base here in Qatar and also at Israel. I mean, how worried are regional players going to be about what's happened now in the last half an hour or so and how this might play out in the hours ahead?
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And this is extremely worrying for regional actors and for those like you and I who live in the region, because obviously bases like Al Udeid, American military bases in the United Arab Emirates, American military built up in Jordan, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, those are all now within Iranian missile reach, and it can be quite worrying. I think regional actors are justifiably worried and are busily at work encouraging Iran at least not to attack bases or targets within their territories and to maintain or to curtail an Iranian response as much as possible.
Mehran, stay with us, won't you, please, because we just want to give a quick summary to our viewers who are just joining us here. The Israeli military has launched what the defense minister said was a preemptive attack against Iran. Apparently, essential sectors were exempted, that's according to the Israeli military. 3 explosions were reported in the capital, Tehran, at least one in the downtown area and one from the north of the city, that's according to sources close to Al Jazeera. We're also hearing Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is not in the capital, Tehran. He's been transferred to a secure location, and that's according to officials who've been talking to Reuters. Israel has closed its airspace to all civilian flights. The US Embassy in Qatar has implemented a shelter-in-place order for all personnel and recommended all Americans to do the same until further notice. Mehran, let's just come back to you, if we can, to keep this discussion going. Look, we've seen Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu make more visits to the White House, probably than any other leader since Trump started his second term. Experts say that he may actually be pushing for a longer military campaign with the goal of toppling the Eurasian regime. But that doesn't necessarily fit in possibly with Trump's preference for what we understand would have been a sort of limited strike. So what is the Israeli endgame here? They're just talking about a preemptive strike, and so far it seems to be 3 locations across Iran at the moment. But what is Israel's endgame here, or what is the aim of this preemptive strike?
What we have seen is that the Israelis have long sought to escalate localized conflict, whether it's Syria, Lebanon, or any of the other immediate areas of Israel, and they've sought to draw in Iran because, according to Israeli calculations, once Iran is drawn in, then the United States would have to be drawn in. And so this is kind of a perfect example of an...
और जब कतर के आसमान में मिसाइलें गरज रही थी उस वक्त देखिए कतर में Oh my God! मारो हमको मारो हम
an Israeli playbook to launch limited strikes on Iran, provoke Iran into a massive attack, then in turn provoke the United States into a prolonged involvement. We know also, as you mentioned, Darren, that the United States has been talking about a limited strike, at least Trump has. And within the Trump administration, we've got people like Vice President Vance, who oppose a prolonged military engagement, and people like Secretary of State Rubio, who just a couple of days ago talked about Iranian missiles as an existential threat, not just to the United States, but to America's regional allies, and therefore came pretty close to calling for regime change. And so what we have is kind of lack of consistency on the part of the United States in terms of exactly how to become involved, how to engage with Iran diplomatically, either or through a limited military conflict, or a prolonged war that would entail regime change. And I think the Iranians have been braced for a prolonged war. Now, whether the Iranian government can afford a prolonged war of attrition, the way they've been planning on it is a different case. But certainly the Iranian government has been preparing itself for a prolonged war of attrition, which in its calculations neither Israel nor the United States can afford.
All right, Mehran Kamrava, the Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Mehran, always good to have you with us. Let's bring in, if we can, before we go to our next guest, let's just bring you another piece of news we're getting here. A US official has just told Al Jazeera that the United States is launching joint strikes with Israel. So if you're just joining us here in Al Jazeera, we're getting these lines coming in thick and fast because of this breaking news story that the US is actually making joint attacks. They are working with Israel on these attacks on Iran. Let's bring in Akiva Eldar. He's an Israeli political analyst. Akiva, you're in Tel Aviv. We've been talking to you now for many months about the build-up intentions and the US military assets in the region. What's your response, first of all, to the news of the attacks, this preemptive strike by Israel this morning on Iran?
Good morning, Darren. First of all, we woke up this morning with something that was familiar to us a year ago, and we wanted to forget. This is the sirens and making sure that the sealed room is available and we have enough mineral water there, and to call the children and the grandchildren to make sure that everybody is okay. But now it looks different. It is clear that it has to do with domestic politics. There was a poll published yesterday in one of the newspapers that shows that close to 2/3 of the Israelis, of the Israeli public, is in favor